book is kind of like an all-you-can-eat buffet where you take just one item too many, but then you're like, it's fine. I love chow mein noodles, which is right beside your salad, which is right beside a rack of ribs with a scoop of ice cream that is melting slowly into everything. That's what this book is. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Read Good, Draw Bad, where we love to read really, really good and draw really, really pretty darn bad. Today we will be visiting New York in a multitude of perspectives in the book Ragtime by E.L. Doctorow. And I can't stop thinking that that name is hilarious. I don't know why. I just keep thinking of the song Mr. Roboto. We will be joining a rich family that makes fireworks and the various historical figures of the early 1900s that revolve around their life story. So join me in this non-musical version of Ragtime. And just so you know, I'm doing a reading challenge where I'm reading the top 100 novels of the 20th century as decided by the Modern Library. You can find more information in the description below. First, a TLDR on this book. This book is a bit messy, and I say that because there are multiple perspectives and you don't really know where they're going until you get to the end of the book. Because I'm incredibly slow, it took me to the end of the book to figure out what the author was trying to do, which is to explain various slices of life that were happening from the years 1900 to about 1912. And this creates a rich tapestry of the politics and culture and ideas that were really important during that time. Now, there are three central stories. The first is of a white, middle to upper class family. Their names are rarely mentioned because this is told from the perspective of the youngest son of the family. So he just calls them what he knows the people in his family as. So we have father, who is the fireworks manufacturing plant owner. We have mother, who's a beautiful and independent woman and honestly one of the nicest people in this book. Then we have mother's brother, who for some reason is called mother's brother and not uncle. I don't really understand that, but there you go. And he is a socialist and more of a communist, really. And he is a socialist interested in social issues of his time. This family takes in an abandoned baby as well as a woman named Sarah, who they eventually bring into her family to be their maid. Sarah is eventually pursued romantically by Coalhouse Jr., and this begins a story of two types of families that are trying to grow, a black family and a white family, and trying to understand each other. It starts out very hopeful. Unfortunately, it doesn't end that way, but it starts out that way. The second story revolves around an immigrant father named Tate and his daughter. Now they are both living in sort of the Jewish quarter, which is kind of like the slums. Now Tate starts off very, very poor, but is an example, perhaps a perfect example of the American dream, where he has an idea and the skills, and he eventually becomes very, very rich as a creative genius of children's toys and animation, which leads him to become a wealthy pioneer in the animation industry. He starts calling himself the Baron so he can be a bit mysterious and so he can function going through high society so that they don't focus on his poor background. It's really kind of a Cinderella story, only, you know, at midnight he doesn't turn back poor. He's rich throughout the entire book. The third story is a story of the black man Coalhouse Jr. and his quest for justice. Coalhouse is attacked and humiliated by a white fire chief named Conklin, who after Coalhouse stands up for himself against racism and prejudice and bullying, Conklin takes Coalhouse's brand new Model T Ford car and burns it and then shoves it in the nearby swamp. Coalhouse tries to do things the right way by pursuing legal action against Conklin because what Conklin did was clearly wrong and Coalhouse is in the right. However, the system is against him because Coalhouse is a black man and Conklin has a position of sort of high favor within his community, so the justice system sees Conklin as untouchable. Coalhouse discovers he cannot win his legal case because of the inherent racism in the justice system that puts him against Conklin and his position of fire chief. Sarah, his lover and soon-to-be wife, goes to help to try and aid him and is killed in the process. And this sets Coalhouse Jr. on a path of rabid vigilantism where he starts firebombing various fire stations all around New York. So Coalhouse and his group of young black men who want to change the future of black people in America are fighting for what they believe to be justice. And the only thing Coalhouse wants out of this whole experience is for his Model T Ford to be restored, because he hopes this show of asking Conklin to restore his car and as well as for Conklin to be brought to justice to show how the justice system should work for Black people as opposed to how it currently did. And if that wasn't enough plot for you, we also follow various historical figures like Houdini, who interacts with the wealthy family at the start of the book. We also see Henry Ford and JP Morgan being involved in the Coalhouse Jr. story as Coalhouse Jr. tries to blow up JP Morgan's library of artifacts and historical items. And the main white family, that's the upper middle class family, also has various historical figures that walk in and out of their lives throughout the book. The ending of this book shows both the good and bad of many characters as it comes to a climax when Coalhouse Jr. threatens to blow up JP Morgan's historical library, unless, of course, his demands for the Model T Ford are met. And the mediation process for preventing this explosion involves the famous civil rights activist Booker T. Washington, who was known for being on the side of peace and love, and is a very stark contrast to Coalhouse Jr., who wants justice to be dealt with properly. The story ends somewhat satisfactorily as Conklin is ostracized by the community because people see that he is the cause for all the violence that's being caused all across the city. Coalhouse Jr. does get his Model T Ford restored. Unfortunately, in the final altercation, he is shot dead by the police. The aftermath of all the stories after Coalhouse Jr. dies is that Mother eventually becomes involved with Tate, and she leaves Father for Tate because he's rich and also slightly a better guy than Father, who runs the fireworks factory. And their family is left with the black baby that Sarah was taking care of. So in a way, the major stories do wrap up, but it definitely doesn't feel that way until you get to the end of the book. Now, thematically, this book is about the changing lives of white and Black Americans and the culture at the time of the early 1900s. And there are various moments where the thought process about what is World War I going to be or what's going to happen in World War I, and those are at the fringes of the main storylines. As well, the economy is featured very much in this book as the author tries to show the importance of large-scale manufacturing with the Model T Ford, and the emergence of new kinds of millionaires and the difference between someone like Tate, who got their money from living the American dream by being good at what they do and working hard, versus someone like JP Morgan, who at the end of the day seems like the kind of millionaire who is behind the scenes kind of tweaking things so that he can make money. So the difference between, you know, someone who's maybe working for their living and a scumbag, I don't know. And more importantly, the entire scene of Coalhouse Jr. watching his car get vandalized is such an important scene and so worth reading, because it explains exactly how racism works and how this form of discrimination prevents people from getting the help they need to have justice in their community, or just how not to be harassed while going about your day-to-day life. Because really what Conklin wanted to prove is that because Coalhouse was a black man, he shouldn't own nice things, so they burned his car and threw it in the swamp. I honestly think that the scene involving this car is the most important and probably the crux and the piece holding this whole novel together. Now, on to the review. I honestly thought there would be more dancing when I started this book, and boy, I was wrong. And if you had trouble following all the different plot points I was trying to point out and all the different characters, that makes two of us. And unlike other books on this list where I would say they could all do with a little bit more plot instead of too much meandering around, in this book I think we could have cut down on a few people here and there. However, when we switch perspectives from major characters to minor characters, and it's not obvious at the start of the book who's the major character and who's supposed to be the minor character. We start off with a young boy who's an unreliable narrator who sees the world in a very different way, to going to Harry Houdini, who's debunking spiritualists, and frankly has nothing to do with the central plot, it's just a segue. And then you add in a story about racial injustice that's charged with important moments and emotion, and a story about how to fix things in America. You know, you went from having what you think is one book to going to like 6 books in one. Each of these different topics could have been like their own book, and I kind of feel like the author said, you know what, like I'm just gonna write all of them and put them in one book. I find it really hard to review this book or to tell people if you could recommend this book, because most characters in this book are incredibly flat except for Coalhouse Jr. However, what I can tell you is when I started to accept this book as a book sort of comprised of many short stories that weave together in little ways, I started to enjoy this book a lot more. But I will say, I think you could have cut out half the little minor character stories that were in this book, and I wouldn't be wondering, like, when are we going to see Houdini again debunking the spiritualists, when in reality he was just there in chapter 2 and never again. And then we get introduced to the Cole House story, and then we think that this story is going to be about racial injustice, and then it is, but then it's also not completely about that. So as you can tell from my perspective, this book took me on a major ride, and I'm not really sure where I stand with it. But I will say parts of it were very, very enjoyable. But I will say that this was a very interesting book, and I'm really trying to think about, like, what does this have to do with the musical Ragtime? And is Ragtime the musical better than this book? Someone please tell me in the comments below. Okay, if you like this review, please like, share, and subscribe, and you can hit the bell notification if you want to know the next time I release a new video. If you have thoughts about this book, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I love reading people's comments, and more than anything, I think this is a book that deserves a lot of good discussion. Next time, we'll be crossing the ocean back into the UK, the United... Well, that's all for me today. I hope you're doing some wonderful reading. I hope that you are having an amazing week, and I look forward to seeing you next time. As always, stay curious, stay reading.